Hey, what's up everyone? In the last video that I did about loudness, the video is called How to Get a Loud Dance Master. I went over a couple of very powerful techniques to get louder dance masters. If you didn't watch this video, then definitely make sure to watch it and watch this one after, or just watch this one first and then watch that one, because this one is a little bit more simple. Why? Loudness can feel like a super difficult subject. I can understand if it feels overwhelming, the amount of techniques that you see out there and how to implement it in your own workflow. However, this video will cover a couple of very easy mindset changes and very simple techniques to get a louder master. I master hundreds of EDM records and I'm doing this every day, and many times getting a louder master is just a result of a couple of simple moves, and it doesn't require rocket science. So let's start with the first simple move, which is simply adding a low cut to your mix. If your track has way too much sub information that you don't really feel, then it can eat up a lot of headroom. So don't automatically do this. In most of my masters, I'm using the SSL Fusion low cut. It's my favorite low cut for mastering. In most cases, when I'm mastering a dance track, the low cut is off. However, sometimes it's at 30, sometimes it's at 40, and sometimes it can even be at 50. However, I do use my 10 Hz band, which is a bell at the Maag EQ, to basically reshape the low end. But that's a different technique. Let's just talk about the simple low cut. You can do it with a FabFilter Pro Q. Let me show you what I've pulled up here, which is just the Dangerous Bax EQ. Let me switch on and off the low cut and just pay attention to the dynamics at the Brainworks BX meter, because the dynamics will definitely decrease when we have no low cut switch on, which means that we are creating headroom for a louder master. As you can see, it can create approximately 2 decibels of dynamic increase. It's really intense, and I wouldn't put the low cut that high. But if you put it at the right frequency and at the right curve, then this can really be a technique that if you have your master chain set up, and if you're A-Bing, for example with Metric AB, with some other commercial tracks, and you just feel that those tracks are louder, sometimes all it takes is just literally adding a low cut, and then you will be able to push your limiter 0.5 dB more. It's little things, and those little things can really matter if you want to achieve loud masters. Next up, and this is a super easy way to mess up all the work that you did on a mix and a master. You can work with the best engineers in the world. If you mess this up, then your track just won't sound good. And if you want to have a louder master, just don't overload your limiter. And what is overloading a limiter? In my opinion, it's when you, as a listener, start hearing the limiter more than the music. That's not what you want. I'm going to play you an example, and I'm switching on gain match. That means that if I push level into the limiter, that the output will be lowered so that we can have a fair comparison. I'm going to first overload the limiter in a negative way so that you can experience how it sounds when the limiter is doing way too much work. Then I'm going to show you what happens if you put something like the Oxford inflator before the limiter. This can as well be standard clip or any other clipping plugin. This can as well be a saturator. This can as well be a compressor. And it can definitely be another limiter as well that's being put early in your mix or on your buses, for example. So that way, when you are hitting the final limiter, you don't need to squeeze it. In my case, when I'm doing a master that's already being processed in the box, then goes through my entire master chain, hits my AD, I'm clipping my AD in most cases. When it's coming back into the DAW and I'm putting a limiter on there and I don't even push the limiter, then in 99% of the cases the track is already loud enough to be commercially put out. So the takeaway is here that if you need to squeeze your limiter extremely hard, there's definitely different issues already in your master. You don't need to have 6 dBs of gain reduction on your final limiter. It will decrease the quality of your master drastically. Let me show you what overloading a limiter looks like and sounds like. So I've played you the delta, which is the limiting that's taking place. You can hear what it's doing, the damage that it's doing. And I bypass the limiter for you. What you can hear when the limiter is in bypass: the low end has punch, the low end feels solid, the track flows nicely. When I'm switching on the limiter that's being overloaded, first thing that happens is the entire punch and low end energy disappears. It just isn't there anymore, and the movement in the track feels lost. That's just definitely what you don't want. Now let me show you what happens if we put something like the Oxford inflator before. So the goal here is to get a more consistent and a louder, higher RMS into the limiter. So we're optimizing the crest factor before hitting a final limiter. Let me show it to you.
Hold me close.
If you overload your limiter, you start getting nasty distortion. You start losing the punch and solidity of a track. However, if you have the right crest factor, because I will show you the difference that this Oxford inflator makes on your dynamic range. Here, have a look. It squeezes it in a way that retains the punch, retains the solidity, and that's what we want. You could do this with saturation as well. So I want you to think of it like that, like getting the track ready for the final limiter. So for very powerful, loud master results, I 100% advise you to not see the last limiter as some kind of magic push that squeezes everything into loudness. You need to have a loud mix already before going into your final limiter, so that your final limiter only needs to do a little bit of work so it doesn't destroy your track. And then the next very simple thing, I already showed it to you, is using delta, using gain match. Gain match lowers the output when you push the gain. However, make sure to switch it off if you export your master. Otherwise you would have unnecessary headroom on your master, which you don't want. So what's important here? It's that you're not fooling yourself. If you increase a limiter like this, it already sounds like the limiter is doing a super good job now because it's louder, while in fact there's no limiting taking place. It's just level. So you don't want to fool yourself. That's why you enable gain match and listen to the limiter. Then when the limiter is set up, and this goes for the release time, for upward compression, soft clipping, transient emphasis, stereo independence, just deactivate gain match, and that way you had a fair listen while adjusting the limiter settings. And this is very crucial in my opinion if you want to have the right settings for that specific case when setting up your master limiter. Then delta is great because delta just shows you what's being limited. And I will show you the difference between some of the intelligent release control options, and I will mess with some settings so you can really hear how much of a difference it makes. So this isn't a real life setting, of course, but this is to show you how properly you can hear what the limiter is doing in delta mode. If you're not using delta mode, you're missing out on such important information. This makes it so easy to hear what everything is doing, which release setting you need to use, and that way just know for a fact how your limiter is treating the signal rather than guessing it. Now you know how it's actually affecting the signal, which will lead to way better sounding masters. Next up is mid-range saturation. The mid-range is extremely important. Oftentimes you will see people adding low end, adding top end, and that's all very good. But in the end, the mid-range is what most people hear. If you listen on cheap earbuds, if you walk in the supermarket, if you play the track on your phone, you won't have real sub information. You won't have super high information in most cases. Of course, AirPods Pro, stuff like that are a little bit better. But in most cases, the mid-range is what is most forward. So if you saturate the mid-range, where all the magic of the song is, then you can really have a louder master easy. Let me show you how I've set up this ozone exciter with a triode setting on the mid-range, and let me just show you how much of a difference that it makes. What's a risk here is that you lose some of the low end punch, but this video is about loudness, so if you want to have a louder master, definitely think about maybe saturating the mid-range. Of course, this is an extreme setting. In a real life scenario it would look a little bit more like this. I really like what it does. It's way more favorable in my opinion, rather than compression. I think this is just really gluing everything together and squeezing the dynamics in such a natural way that it's just sounding more upfront and louder. It's a really powerful thing, and I think ozone exciter is amazing for this specific purpose. When you want to only saturate 1 or 2 or 3 parts of the signal separately, and it has delta mode. You can switch on and on the bands. Everything is in parallel, and triode just sounds super good. The top end saturation on, for example, drums can sound really good as well. Let me show it to you. But that's a different video. However, this thing sounds really incredible. So yeah, definitely use it when you need it, and it will help you get better sounds. Then this connects with the first thing that we did, which was adding a low cut. And that's just a general rule for loudness. If you have less bass and more highs, it's easier to get a louder track. So this means lowering the kick and bass in your mix will most likely cause an easier mix to get loud. If you want to go drastic though, you can think of adding a tilt filter. I do advise to be super careful with this, because let's say that we're adding 3 dBs of gain. You see that here we're actually adding way more, because the curve is going up. So yeah, that's super important to keep in mind. Now, when sweeping for the right frequency, I advise to just separate the low, like the sub end, and everything else, and then just doing a little bit. But let me show you how much of a difference this makes in overall tonal balance. You could see that the dynamics went up as soon as we opened the EQ curve, and yeah, this is just simply because there's less sub, more highs, and less headroom is being eaten up by all that bass. Of course, you want to be very careful here. This is not a technique that I would quickly use. However, it's a very good way of showing you how much of a difference it makes when you shift the tone. And that's what I want you to understand. For loudness, you need to have some kind of tone shift in some cases, because a track can be overly bass heavy. A track can have way too loud low end and a dull sounding mid and top end. And that's just not in your favor when you want to achieve loudness. Then the last simple way of getting a way louder master is by clipping. Now, I love to clip my AD. I'm using the Prism Sound AD conversion. And what does it mean? My entire mastering chain is being captured by the Prism, and I am doing my final stage of analog limiting with the look ahead analog limiter, and I can basically set it up to overload the AD. I can decide on the output of the LAL how much I'm clipping the Prism. This is a super powerful way of getting a way louder track, a higher RMS, without losing the solidity and punch of the track. Even better, it's pleasant. It generally sounds way more glued together and way more professional, loud and powerful. Now the good news is that there is a way with plugins as well to achieve this. The Gold Clip by Swape Digital mimics the Lavery Gold AD converter, and you can basically clip this plugin and it mimics that sound of the AD converter when being clipped in the analog world. Then I'm not going into everything that the Gold Clip has to offer. That may be a really cool other video where I'm just going over Gold Clip. But what you can do is you can clip, you can as well bring up quiet parts with the gold setting, and you can soften the clipper with alchemy so that it's less aggressive. Now the good news is that this thing has a delta as well. So let's set it up and I'll show you how much of a difference this little beast can make. So as soon as I'm switching on the Swape Digital Gold Clip, you see that the limiter has way less to do, sounds way cleaner, and the dynamic range just gets squeezed. And that's what you want if you want to have a louder master. As well, if you listen to the delta on the Gold Clip, it's almost doing 2 dBs of clipping, and it still doesn't destroy the entire signal. The delta sounds super good, and I would highly advise mimicking AD clipping from the analog mastering world. I do need to be honest, analog gear sounds different than plugins, and clipping an actual mastering AD is just superior. However, Swape Digital Gold Clip does an extremely good job in mimicking this. It's super versatile, you can set it up super easily, and it sounds absolutely excellent. So it's not the cheapest plugin, but definitely look out for that plugin if you are after a very good and powerful plugin that mimics AD clipping. So there we have it, some simple moves that get you a way louder dance master. If you didn't watch the other video, definitely check it out. If you did and still have any questions, make sure to drop them below. I love talking about loudness because it's such an important factor in mastering for dance music. There's so many exciting techniques to get a louder master, so I absolutely love talking about it and showing you examples. So I hope that you enjoyed watching this video, and I'll see you on the next one. Yo yo.